Hello and welcome to today's HR Huddle. I'm thrilled to be with you. I'm Tamera Loerzel, and with me is my partner, Jennifer Wilson. And then we have a guest speaker, Dana Jarvis. And Dana, I'll let you introduce yourself for a moment.
Sure. So just in a nutshell, Big Four auditor out of school, turned HR operations after around 5 or 6 years. Most recently, I'm focusing on external search for CPA firms. But throughout the last 10 years, I've just had a sort of a passion for the CPA exam, and sort of just have talked to so many people going through it that, I think it's something to share and talk about and keep at the front of everyone's minds right now.
Perfect. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about today. Is we're going to talk about how leaders can help our young next gen pass the CPA exam, and what we can do directly in our firms to be able to help facilitate and increase the maybe recognition and value of the CPA. We'll talk about that, and then some strategies, practical strategies that you can implement to help increase the pass rate for those that are studying for it and sitting for it, and so that we can have more success there. So I think where we'll start is, maybe why this is an important topic. And I think the three of us are very passionate about why this is an important topic. So I'll set it up, and then maybe you can jump in and add, Dana, and Jen, you can add some color. And I know one of the things that we've been talking a lot about with HR leaders and partners, even managers, all of those affecting talent, is the capacity challenge that we've been experiencing. And we don't foresee that going away in the near future for a variety of reasons. And so one of the things that we want to do is highlight, how do we, increase the number of CPAs in our profession, in addition to addressing the capacity shortage that we have in other areas like the non-traditional, workforce. And
Sure. So sorry, everybody. But Tamera was right in the middle of talking about this capacity issue. And certainly we want to see our organizations not only attract more people to the accounting profession, but more licensed CPAs. And so, Dana, maybe you tell us where you want to start related to your passion for the CPA exam, your experiencing helping people pass, the tips that you have given, that sort of thing. You pick where to start.
Yeah, I think for firms, there's probably 3 major things they can do to really make a difference. And I think there's one thing in just saying, okay, there's changes coming up with the CPA exam evolution. And there's another thing of actually getting the information out there, having advising sessions, really taking an active role. So that's the first thing I would just recommend, is a champion. So probably an HR manager or above, someone that can influence partners, upper level management, that's going to really understand all the intricacies of education requirements, scheduling, blackout periods of taking the exam, just really deep dive in there so they can be front and center in being the advocate. And I would pair that person up with someone who recently just passed on the staff side. So you sort of want to do a dual approach and have these resources available for anyone. If they're a more tenured person that's looking to take the exam, brand new to the firm, I would love to have people have an advising session once they first started.
Yeah, I love that. And we recommend the same thing. We call it the CPA exam shepherd. I like where you're headed, that it's a person of influence. I hadn't thought about that in the past. We've recommended it be somebody close to the exam. But I hear what you're saying about the idea that they would have influence, maybe be heard on these blackout periods for studying, or the need to really bring in special resources, maybe to study certain parts with the group because they're all struggling with that part. Or anyway, I just think we really need to have that single owner or leader. And oftentimes these people are without the shepherd. Yep. So they're sheep kind of scattered in the business, all sort of doing their own thing or not doing their own thing. And it's hard to see if they're doing well, and people are afraid to ask because they don't want to pressure them. And it's just a really weird circumstance if we don't have this cohort developed with this champion, as you mentioned. And I love if it would come from HR. I think that would be amazing if the organization had that resource. But I think it, for smaller firms, it could be anybody, just a single voice that's going to be bringing them together and speaking for them, advocating for them, and helping them also.
And sometimes it's simple. It's just someone to sit down with you to go over the state board's, like transcripts requirements, or like how to sign up on NASBA. It's just someone to sit down with you and just hold your hand for like an hour. And that's all someone needs to get going. So it doesn't have to be, someone that's going to spend hours and hours. It just has to be a resource that knows what they're talking about.
For sure. Yeah. And also, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Maybe it's somebody who they also would tell their stories to, that's part of what I'm interested in for this person is we tell people create a one-size-fits-one study plan with each person taking the exam in the firm. And it has to be tailored and it has to be honest. And for it to be honest, people have to tell their truth. Here's my circumstances. Here's what I have going on at home. Here's what my next 6 months looks like. One of the things people tell us in firms about why they didn't take the exam or why they quit in the middle of taking the exam. They got a few parts passed and then just let them all go. They tell us things that are sort of like life happened. I was planning a wedding and then we got, began expecting a child and, then I had to take care of one of my parents and all this stuff happens and life happened and maybe they didn't have anybody to tell and nobody could help work out the work stuff with them. And so anyway, I love that idea that, that it would be somebody they trusted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that could influence policies, time off. Some of those things are hard to get. So.
Well, and that's one of the things we think needs to be defined, is, how do we support time off, time to study, what does that look like, and be consistent. Because if I work, for Jen, I might get really good time off, but I work for Dana, I might not get really good time off, during slower periods. It's like, no, you can't study for the CPA exam, even though, we might be slower. So I think that's important too. I think the one size fits one.
The other way around though.
I think the one size fits one also tailoring to learning styles and study methods and all of that. And Dana, I know you had, some ideas and thoughts on that.
Sure. So I'm always a big advocate of questions, doing questions repetitively, and then flashcards, homemade flashcards. So those are the two things that are more direct learning. So that's how people, consolidate information, recalling stuff you don't know, answers daily. The lectures that you watch online and the reading that you just, try to memorize, I think that's more of a supporting activity. So I see people a lot of times thinking that the lectures and reading are more like how they're going to pass. And then it takes them failing a few times to figure out, no, questions are where it's at. But, it'd be nice if they're taught this when they first start studying, so they don't have to fail multiple times, that there's someone that understands how to study, and people that don't have an exam scheduled that just keep reading the book. I did this, so I'm guilty, but, it's not really considered a real exam, and they're just sort of wasting their own time by trying to memorize a book that they don't have an exam scheduled. So I see that all the time. But again, if you had someone on the firm side that just understood these sort of common fallacies that happen, I think you can really make a difference in pass rates.
I love it.
And again, I think that's where the shepherd comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And also, though, I do think that there's sort of a traditional way of learning. I mean, if you think about it, the way that most of us went to school, the teacher gave a lecture, we took notes, they told us to read before the lecture or afterwards, we highlighted the reading. Then when it was time to study for the test, we tried to find the notes and the highlights. and we reviewed them, and then we took the test. And sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't. And I think what you're saying is like really focusing on what questions are going to be on this exam. What do I think will be on this exam? What areas am I studying? What kind of questions and answers could I rotate through, repeated daily? And then the splash card idea, that should be like the sort of the daily workout. And then these other things are supplemental. I think that's really interesting. And it is flipping, the old learning model on its head, and probably rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, I would assign, 30, 40 questions a day to yourself and do the reading when it supports something you don't know. But it's hard if you just read the book, front to back, you don't know what's actually being tested. So there could be no questions on something that's hanging you up that you're just spending, hours studying, and it's not even tested. So you have to really be strategic, and you're going to be much more familiar if you focus on questions on what's going to be on the actual exam.
And are those questions available in my review course, or, talk to us about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I would do, a lot of people use Becker, and they have a huge bank of questions, and you would assign yourself, make sure you split up the whole book between, the date you start studying, and a month and a half out is usually enough to study. And then, for a week in there, it's almost all flashcards. You're just going through everything you've gotten wrong over and over again. Sometimes the AI CPA releases questions that are on previous exams. So, I mean, there's stuff out there, but usually the review course should really give you thousands of questions to do.
That's great. Super. So what other advice do you have?
I love the idea of a panel. So I did this at my last firm. I think is really successful, of getting 2 to 3 people who've recently passed. Most of the time you'll hear them with the same study methods, but just having like a peer group of people that have passed that are happy to help. And then you just like dig into the really minute of like, how long did you study? How many questions do you do? Like, people want to know the details. They don't want to know high level, they want to know, like, I need to do this every day. How did you do it? I mean, it's like a free way HR can really help. And it's, maybe an hour of time, a webinar. But it's just low hanging fruit to just pair the two groups up together.
Well, and they know they're not alone then.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to ask the nitty gritty question. I love it. And when you first said panel, I was almost thinking a technical panel, but this is like I'm almost going to call it a lifestyle panel, that's going to come in and say, so, here's how I got my work done, and then I'd eat dinner, and then I'd go work out, and then I'd come back, and they'll like get into like the nuts and bolts of here's how I managed it with my schedule. And then this is the kind of studying I did, and here are the parts that I struggled the most with, and here's how I got past that. And I just love that idea of gathering a group of people to come, to cycle through. And then I can hear 2 or 3 different ways too. So maybe if I was putting that panel together, I'd want to try to get sort of a diverse cross section of people that handled it a couple of different ways. Or, somebody who had a terrible setup with their circumstances, their life was insanely busy, but they still fit it in. And then somebody else who didn't have quite as much going on. Sometimes that's actually harder to get motivated to study, so just trying to create that diversity in the panel. Super cool. I like it.
Does the panel address one of the things we've talked about, and maybe the panel, or there's other ideas, Dana, the value of the CPA? Like, I think a lot of young people we hear from, current leaders, there's just like a question of, why should I get the CPA? Where I think for many of us and current leaders in the firms, it was just automatic. It's what you did. And, there was a high value. So I just wonder what you think about that, Dana.
I mean, I see from a recruiting standpoint in placing people that their market value, for example, if you have a CPA long term, I mean, how many more thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars you'll make. control their roles, for example. They won't hire a lot of times without a CPA. So it can hold you back. You don't want to use scare tactics, but I think definitely hearing from people who have passed, it's not as bad as people think once they get through it. It's usually not as bad. So I think just sharing war stories, and you'll have it forever. I'm now a recruiter. I still have my license active. So I think it's just such a it's like our MBA for the accounting profession, and it's a lot cheaper than an MBA, which is great. So I'm always an advocate.
Yeah. Well, and I do believe there is like a continued, always respected value of the credential. There's a sort of an immediate perseverance and trust kind of feeling that comes from people that that passed and that carry the designation. The code of conduct and professional ethics and those things are helpful too. Being governed by those things, or being perceived to be governed by those things, is helpful. I agree with you that if all candidates are equal for almost any role, and they're all good accounting candidates or whatever, the CPA designation is going to be a bonus. And as Tamera said at the top of the hour, we're probably going to continue to see strong demand at a minimum, probable likely ongoing scarcity to some degree, and high demand for the credential too. So anyway, it's worthwhile. And I always tell people it's a little bit like, I don't know, you get your undergrad in accounting and it's like running 22 of a 26.2 mile run. I'm just going to stop at 22, and I'm like, how about no, how about finish the whole thing? Then you can say you did the whole thing, and that's a permanent. So anyway, those are just some of the things to think about for sure.
I think, another area just to think about is educational requirements. I know in California, for example, the laws are very complex, and a lot of people don't understand there's sitting requirements versus getting licensed and transcripts. I mean, it is really complex in California. I don't know what it's like in other states, but I think someone that understands that piece of it and approaches it on the front end would be very helpful for most staff. There's a lot of people that don't even do it because they don't think they qualify, but they actually do. So I would say definitely education requirements and experience requirements, just, helping people understand, what you have to do, how many years. It's that in private industry, sometimes I see people not realize they have to work underneath a licensed CPA. And so then they have to go somewhere else. So just each piece, I think there's probably about 10 total to sort of address with people.
And where would you, if you weren't in a firm that had an HR person who knew that, or would we go to our state society probably, and to NASBA for that sort of advice or resource?
So the state society should have like a licensing handbook, and it has all the information in there. It's just, you have to know to get to this PDF, you have to know what page of 50 to go to. But it should all be in there. And usually they have a good help hotline you can call. So you just have to get curious if you're on the HR side and do a little digging, but it should all be there.
Awesome.
That's great.
Any last advice, Dana, that you would want to impart?
I think it's just low hanging fruit. There's if you're at a larger firm, say 40 to 50 staff going through the exact same thing at the exact same time. And it's such a great, way to unify people. And I think if you can figure out a way how to, even if it's just a panel, having a few advising sessions, I think the loyalty you're going to get back to your firm is going to be tenfold if you can help them through that process. So I think
I would say that scales. I think that scales, even 2 or 3 in a small firm.
Yep.
Matching them up.
Oh, yeah. Well, and also, even if I were in a firm and I were the only one going to take the CPA exam, going to social media or going to my graduating class or saying, hey, who else out there in the world is studying for this. I see lots of people talking about the CPA exam and Twitter and other places, and creating your own cohort. If you are an individual and your firm isn't big enough to offer that kind of a cohort, or you haven't aligned with a firm yet, I would think your university is going to know, the Beta Alpha Psi chapter or those kind of folks are going to know who else is preparing to sit or already sitting for portions, and creating that cohort or study group, that support group, maybe that's the way to call it. I love that idea. And I think that's one of the consistent, there's like two things that all the firms that have had good success will say about. One is they had a shepherd, or this champion Dana suggested, and the second is they formed a cohort and made sure their people felt like they were part of a group, supporting one another, not competing to finish, not competing on scores or any of that kind of stuff, but more like a support group, all interested in everybody winning.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes. Well, awesome. Well, this is a great topic. And Dana, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate you sharing your journey, your insights, and hopefully everybody got, at least one thing they can go back and apply. And you can always reach out to us, with thoughts or questions. We'd love to learn what you're doing, but also questions. So thanks for being with us on today's HR Huddle, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Dana.